and then I will share my screen so that we can see the contents of the PowerPoint. Hopefully you can see that. Holly, is that showing okay?
Yep, that's fine. Yep, thanks.
Okay, lovely. Okay, excellent. So, welcome to Caring for Those Who Care workshop. Like I said earlier, I'm Maryam, Nazir, Senior Educational Psychologist, and Holly Beavon, Trainee Educational Psychologist. Both of us will be talking through with you and through this session this morning. Okay, so I guess it's thinking with you. What we'd like before we started is really to get thinking with you. What do you already do in terms of when you engage in self-care? What do you already do with, sorry, I'm just going to end the show because it's doing something that, share again. Okay, so yeah, sorry about that interruption. It was just not showing in the same way that I'd like for you to see. So it's, what do you already do in terms of your self-care? What do you already do when it comes to engaging in your self-care? And what we'd like for you to do is go to menti.com. So for you to just log on to www.menti.com. So you saw earlier Richard used it in a very sort of sophisticated way. This is our way of using this app, and it's just to say, if you go on there and put in the code 81582027, we really want you to be able to share some of what you're already doing and some of the things that you find beneficial. So if you just do that now, that'd be really good.
And then I've just attached a link in the chat section. So if you click on that, you'll be able to see the answers coming through there of what people are including.
Holly, if you wanted to be able to share some of the things that people are including, if you see that, that'd be great.
That's just waiting now.
Give people a minute just to share that.
Okay, so we've got reflection coming through. So that's one way in which people are engaging in self-care. Music, activities, that's another way. 3 that have come forward so far. Oh, knitting, being outside in the garden, that's come as quite a strong one. As you'll see on the word cloud, the bigger the words, the more people have wrote that. So that's kind of come through as the dominant one. Reading, music, walking, drink, mindfulness, sharing with SLT, making cakes. So yes, some lovely ideas coming through there. Yeah, I think that's
really useful ones that are just, yeah, that people are sharing. You just see that now. Yeah.
reflection.
Brilliant. I mean, you can see there in terms of just that all of these things are so significant when people are talking about what do you already do in self-care. And we really wanted to be able to have a think with you that there will be things that you're already doing, and hopefully by the end of the session we'll have thought more with you with the things that you're already doing, or what else we can help you think around in terms of your self-care, what else might be useful when we're talking about this. But I really want to be able to say to you, with regards to some of the things that we'll be talking about, is just to be mindful of yourselves, just to be careful with yourselves, and just to think about some of the things, if this, in terms of the content from this morning and in this session, that you feel that actually I just need to be able to hold on to some of the things that the feelings that are being evoked for me, and I just need to either just to step away or step out. That's okay. It's just to say that to you, that in thinking about self-care and thinking about how do we care for ourselves when we're caring for others, sometimes we just want to be able to share with you that there may be moments where you may want to just have a bit of a break or have a bit of a pause, and that please do that, and that we welcome that. So yeah, so we wanted to be able to start with where you're at, to remind you of those key things that are important for you. And I guess it's sharing with you now. I'm going to share with you a video that I think is really useful for us to just to reflect on for a minute in our roles, in the various ways that we do our roles before we go into the main bit of the session. So please, yeah, enjoy this 2-minute video. So as you saw that, just in terms of the chat, was there anything that particularly resonated with you with regards to that video? Is there anything that people felt that they particularly took away from that clip, or is there anything that you would like to comment on before we move on? Holly, if you wanted to just keep an eye on the chat to see if anybody shares anything.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Got nothing through just yet.
I guess the point that video makes well is that often we do so much for others. Often we are doing and doing and doing. We go in, we do, and we carry on doing. And we perhaps forget in those moments how much we're taking on, how much we're taking with us, how much is happening to us without us being aware of it. And there's somewhere where we need to take it. So hopefully people would have reflected on some of those points for themselves during the work that you do and during the day that you survive through, and see through, just in terms of taking care of others, and doing for others.
So similar to what you're saying, Paul's just made the comment, it shows the human aspects of being very well. So again, looking after ourselves, and how we can do that. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just that notion of being human that is really, really important for us to remind ourselves we're all human, trying to work in circumstances that sometimes prove challenging. And it's holding on to what Richard was saying this morning, that actually we do it together, and we remind ourselves that I can, even in those most trying times. So yeah, and who's there for us as well. So what we hope that you gain from this session is just to gain an understanding around psychology, and demystifying the psychology when it comes to self-care and well-being. We often kind of have references to psychological principles or concepts that sometimes are difficult for us to apply. And what Holly and I really want us to do is break that down and make that psychology accessible. So what we're doing is sharing with you some ideas in terms of we're putting you in that position that you are the people that know you best. You are the people that are doing what you're doing, and what we're doing is equipping you and giving you, I guess, some of the constructs that sometimes are difficult to grasp and breaking them down. So all we're doing is going, when we're thinking about this in this way, this is what it means and this is how you can apply it. So hopefully by the end of the session, we will have shared with you some ideas, but what you will be doing is applying those ideas for yourself and for what you already do. And I guess what we really want to reinforce is that point about your well-being and care, that you consider the ways that you prioritise your well-being and care, that we make time for that, and that we don't forget that, because often we hear about that, but really applying that and making time for it is challenging to us. So we want you to hold that in mind. We want you to take that and really, if you come into this session and think, I'm really thinking about applying this to myself, not to others, not for others, but for myself. So that's our best hope. So in terms of your best hope, if you want to just chat, share in the chat function, what are your best hopes? So that's how Holly and I saw this session and what we thought would be useful. But again, we're guided by you. So if you want to share anything that you feel is pertinent, please do that now, and we can really think about it with you as well. I'll give you again a few seconds to do that before I go in. Okay, so if there isn't anything come through yet, what? No, so
got a couple coming through
Oh,
now.
yeah.
I'd like to know more about psychologists' view, how they view well-being, and what I can take from that. So yes, we're going to explore that a bit, so that will hopefully be useful for you. And to find time to care for me, as I see myself very much in the clip you have just shown. Oh, that's in terms of obviously seeing that as relatable. Really good point, and we can explore that a bit further. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
That's great, thank you. So yeah, so we hope throughout the session that we're able to think more with you along those lines. Okay, so again, I'm reinforcing the care messages. I've said that earlier, but I just want to say it again, because care messages are important to remind ourselves constantly. Share only what you feel comfortable to share. We're providing a safe space within this workshop, permission to step out and step back in, like I said earlier, and then there are signposts at the end for further support if needed. So by the end of the session, if there are things that you're left with, there's further signposts for you for your reference.
We've just had a couple more comments come in. So one of them being how we can make self-care part of school rather than an add-on. So that might be useful, some of the tools that we explore further, and seeing how that might feed in to the school that you're part of as well. And I'm hoping to gain ideas on how to care for myself and others that care for extremely vulnerable learners. Yeah, very important. Yeah, so yeah.
So hopefully over the course of this session, we will have gone through, again, it's reminding you that it's perhaps at an introductory level, but at the, you can take forward, hopefully, in terms of some of the key things that are going to be applicable to your setting or your school as well. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so Holly, over to you for this bit.
Thanks, Maryam. So yes, so we're going to look at kind of focusing on our mental health and well-being to begin with, and kind of thinking around that and how we might perceive that. So in terms of thinking around that, this is a standard definition that was developed through the World Health Organization, and they defined mental health and well-being as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So I guess when we're thinking around that, in terms of that definition, it's very much around how we learn to cope with the stresses, how we manage the stresses in place. And I think when we think about around that, I'm coming to kind of the conversation to think critically around that. And actually, it's not just about how we cope with the situation, but actually we need to be considering the environment in which we're exposed to as well. So I think even though that definition is there, we can broaden that out within the schools that we work with, within the communities that we work with, and think around the environment and how we support, how we learn to cope with situations and the stresses of life as well. So it's just adding that perspective in there too. Yep, so now we're gonna look at these two visual images. So as you can see here, we've got two images, and historically, often in terms of thinking around our mental health, previously it has been categorized as mental illness and mental well-being, and actually them being apart from one another, and actually they're in isolation almost, whereas within more modern day society and how we perceive it now, we're seeing it across a continuum. So we're not considering it as in isolation from other, but actually we all have mental health, we all have well-being, and it's important to normalize that within our settings, that actually we need to be taking care of our mental health, but each other's mental health as well. So it's just emphasizing that actually we all have that mental health, and that's important for us to acknowledge around that. So again, I think this is an opportunity to provide more context in terms of how we perceive our mental health. So again, the first kind of bullet point is thinking about the importance of the environment and the interaction between our thoughts, feelings, beliefs within the environment. So when we think of an example around this, so there might be two people that are really under an overwhelming amount of pressure, but then in terms of actually how they respond to that, the environment might be an mediating factor within this. So actually, if you've got an environment that's supportive of this individual, or you've got an environment that's unsupportive, you're likely to get different outcomes for that individual. So it's just identifying how the environment interplays within that interaction for the individual, and thinking around the environments that we are exposed to and how supportive they are in terms of our mental health and how we cope with the situation around that. So as well, historically, we've also seen mental health again as being very within us. So you might have heard the language, oh, that individual might have a chemical imbalance. And again, it's thinking around that language in terms of actually that's quite a fixed reality for that individual. So it's thinking around how we have an awareness of the environment and what that interplay does to us, because when we have an awareness that there is a control over our mental health and our well-being and the outcomes around that, but then we are more likely to be able to change certain things within the environment and make adaptations around that to help us to cope with certain situations and stresses that we face. And again, just to re-emphasize, there are many things outside of our mind that we can do to support our mental health and well-being. So it's just being aware that actually we do have control, and similar to what Richard was saying this morning around we can have that mindset to do things around our mental health and well-being. We can change certain outcomes in support of that. And again, we just need to consider as well cultural, social variations and lived experience. And I'm thinking quite a lot of the time in terms of lived experiences, we don't actually ask what is happening for individuals. We go down the line of, well, what's wrong with that individual, and it's actually understanding what has happened to an individual and how can we understand their lived experiences to really know what is going on for them. So it's just to provide a bit of context in terms of the importance to listen to individual stories, and the coping mechanisms that they have in place and the experiences they've been exposed to throughout their lives, that might be a real struggle for some individuals in terms of dealing with these situations and therefore contributing to the outcomes of their well-being. So just hopefully that provides you a bit more of a context in terms of how the environment and our individual perceptions interplay when we think about our mental health and well-being. Okay, so this is just a nice visual. I hope you like the visual, but yeah, it helpfully breaks it up a little bit more. So in terms of back to kind of when we're thinking around, again, kind of social inequalities that we might experience within life that actually might be contributing to mental health outcomes. So rather than again as seeing it a very individual problem, we need to be looking broader than that. And this kind of leads it on to where it says unfair opportunity distribution. Hopefully you can see that in that image, just near towards the bottom. But what we mean by this is actually when we're thinking about children and young people, and actually what opportunities have they been provided with in terms of equal opportunities within life, and thinking around the kind of social determinants that are in that visual. So thinking around poor diet, income inequality, discrimination. So we might be thinking about racism around that, unemployment, education inequality, childhood trauma. So thinking around actually how a lot of the time these unfair opportunities are actually contributing to our mental health, as opposed to actually we can't cope with that situation. So it's just thinking around how these interact, and actually within the positions that we're in, we actually provide a voice, we provide a platform to be able to minimise this distribution from the policies that we put in place and through the norms that we create through our schools, through our communities, through the language that we use. So it's really just being aware of the importance to view mental health as not necessarily just something that lies within us, but actually it's bigger than that, and we need to be looking at the social inequalities that are in place that contribute to those outcomes too.
Thanks, Holly. So as Holly's described there, we didn't want to go into the idea of what self-care looks like for ourselves in the absence of the context that we're working in. So what we wanted to be able to share with you is what's behind our care. So what's behind what we're doing are various structures and various systems that impact on what we do and how we care. And the result and the cost of that can look on there in terms of the words that you may have come across and the words that people may have shared with you, or you've looked up for yourself, or things like secondary trauma. You may have come across vicarious trauma. You may have heard the words secondary traumatic stress, or you may have this is maybe the first time that you're coming across those words, but you may relate to them in terms of empathy fatigue, compassion fatigue. So these are some of the words that are described when we're in that very active, caring role, very, very much in the moment, very much doing what we're doing in the work that we're doing. And some of the things in terms of those descriptions, some of the things that may happen and the natural consequence of doing the work that we have been tasked with is that we have some type of reaction to that. So, and the reaction is a natural consequence of developing an empathic and caring relationship. So when we're putting in, as that cartoon was describing earlier, there are things that then impact on us with regards to how we feel about that. And again, the cost of caring, all of the things described above occur from exposure to traumatic material. So it might not be that you're experiencing the trauma, but by supporting somebody who's either traumatized or being triggered in terms of your own trauma, you may have an experience that is described in some of the words there earlier. Then also within that, there can be a single traumatic incident or a build-up over time for us. So it could be in terms of some of the things that are, when it comes to those trauma experiences, that it's not actually exposure to traumatic material, that it's just an incident. For example, in a school setting, it might be a critical incident, or it might be that it's a build-up over time that impacts on us and it affects us in that way. And some of the other words that you may have come across, and we wanted to be able to explain the meaning behind these words, projection and transference. So projection, you may have heard often, some of these words get thrown about and you think, what does that mean? So we want to be able to break that down so that it's accessible again. Projection, when we're talking about projection, this involves attributing our feelings and thoughts to others, specifically those feelings and emotions that may be hard to manage. I'm thinking particularly in the context that you might be working in. So if you're thinking about your work with young people, it might be that that young person is feeling big, strong emotions that they're feeling and feeling the sense of being overwhelmed. And what may happen is that those feelings are, in terms of projected over to you, and ascribed to you because they're difficult to manage. So because I'm feeling like that, I'm going to be demonstrating that feeling to you and making almost that link to say that this, my feeling is onto you. And transference, this involves attributing our feelings and thoughts of previous experience and people onto a completely new and different individual. A good example of this is in those moments when we've met people that have made us feel like we didn't want to feel. If we then meet somebody with a similar style, even though they're not that person, we may take our feeling of that person that we originally had that feeling for onto that person. Hope that makes sense. I'm seeing some nods. So it's that sense of, it's not that individual that's doing that, but the feeling that a previous individual has evoked for you, a previous relationship has evoked for you, that you're ascribing to the new relationship. And often teachers can find themselves in that situation, especially with young people that have had traumatic early experiences or had those experiences with adults that have provided a care experience for that young person, and they now are taking that care experience forward. So it's in our roles to be able to step back, think for a minute to say, where is that stemming from? Where is that originating from? And to not take it in that very personalized way that it is about what I'm doing, what I'm saying, that actually this is a feeling that the young person is bringing, and we're going to stay with that feeling. And it's helpful that you're aware of these so that you don't take on these emotions and therefore we avoid that feeling that it's unmanageable. We also can avoid projection and transferring our emotions and feeling onto others if we're more aware of them. Sometimes we may not knowingly do this in terms of how we are in our relationship with other staff members or with other colleagues. So it's just to say, it's being aware. What is happening is being aware of that emotion and the emotions being evoked. So again, we're just going to have a little pause here and we're going to think about this word, drowning in empathy. And it's quite powerful as a concept. And some of the things that we've shared with you just, in terms of projection and transference and secondary trauma, thinking about the word drowning in empathy, then what does it feel like when you have that sense? So if you do have that sense, we're not making any assumptions, you may not have that sense, but if you have that sense sometimes that you're, we want to be able to think with you what that means for you. And if you just go to menti.com again and put that code in, and we will then see what people are saying with regards to what it means to drown in empathy. I'll just give you a minute.
And again, I'm just going to put the link in the chat so then that you can see the responses coming through as well.
Okay, so if we click on that link, we can see what people are saying.
Yeah, overwhelming, completely get that. Mentally exhausting, helpless, tiring, sadness, anxious, yeah, really good, yeah, all consuming, yeah, so you feeling that it's consuming all of you, and probably hard to switch off in that instance, which has just come through, unable to switch off. Yeah, keep coming through.
Absolutely. So yeah, so those feelings that you are describing there, very much in terms of they're quite, in terms of emotions, they are strong emotions that are being displayed with regards to having that I'm taking on this role of caring, but then this is how this is what it's evoking for me. And is there any more before I move on, Holly?
Not that I can see. No, I think they've all been covered.
Yeah. Okay. So when, again, in terms of some of those feelings that you were sharing, we've got another visual that hopefully will demonstrate in terms of the capacity cup, ways I guess it's thinking about your capacity and thinking about ways to manage your capacity. Sometimes that's the difficulty can be that actually we've got a limit, you know, in terms of we all have a limit with regards to how much we're expected to do, with how much we can do and how much we're able to do. And in this cup, what we've got is that sometimes, and some of the words there are the words that you were using in terms of anxiety, overflowing. When our cup's overflowing, we find ourselves irritable, perhaps exhausted, overwhelmed. You know, we're finding that it's just too much when it's full. And it's realizing, how do we get that sense of, where am I in terms of the cup? Have I got all the space in the world? And I don't know if any of us have that. Am I at that next level where I'm juggling life, but there's plenty of capacity left? So it's thinking about your cup, where you're at. And am I nearly full, at risk of spilling over? Because when it gets to the top, that's when I guess it's too late for us to then perhaps think in that way that we need to sometimes with regards to what's best for us. So it's realizing, isn't that in terms of in the word that you might want to use is in terms of your capacity, in terms of how you are managing or being expected to manage a situation, where you're at. And then it's some of the things surrounding that. So is thinking about what is filling your cup. If you are feeling that way, what's being thrown into that cup that is making that feeling, you know, in terms of how is it that, what are the expectations, what is happening behind that? Are you able to throw some things out of your cup? Question to yourself, you know, am I able to go, hang on a minute, this is too much now? Try not to let more into your cup if possible. Are you in a place to say, I know, you know, in terms of I'm able to assert myself, I'm able to say, this is as much as I can do right now. And then we start thinking about problem solving. If we're not able to say some of the things, then what can we do with what's been expected? So what can we do with what we're tasked with? Is there anybody that can help us? Is there anybody that can join us? Is there anything that, you know, all of us, we need a team behind us. Is there anybody else that's able to help me think through this? Focus on what's in your control. So what can I control? What is the thing that I'm able to manage? What do I then need to do in order to manage? That's the small step that I'm going to take. And then thinking about, how am I going to really do what's needed in my self-care? And that's the important bit. How am I going to make time to do some of the things that I need to move away from this for a short while? So in terms of relaxation, in terms of time out, how am I going to make that? How am I going to build that in? How am I going to be true to myself with that? So it's a really helpful visual. And again, we'll be sharing these slides with you so you can take that forward. And most importantly, put your own oxygen mask on first. We forget this. We lose the sense of this. In schools, we spend a great deal of time doing this for others. We end up doing this again and again, and then forgetting what's important for us. And the quote there is, in schools we spend a great deal of time placing oxygen masks on others people's faces while we ourselves are suffocating. A really powerful quote to go, the importance of pausing, the importance of going, I am going to be thinking about what's overwhelming me in my capacity cup, and I'm going to be making that space for me to know when I need to go, it's getting too full, when do I need to get the support that I need? And this is, I guess, a way of us sharing with you why sometimes we end up doing and thinking in the way that we do with regards to our feelings. There's a notion of meta-emotional philosophy. So this is so again, thinking about our feelings. So this is how we see our feelings and how we feel about our feelings and where they originate from. So it's the beliefs we hold about emotions and their expressions. So thinking about that, we all have had our experiences that have led to our emotional responses. So what's making us respond in the way that we are? So a person's meta-emotion philosophy is often the result of early experiences. So who was the person telling me the messages that I'm now telling myself? Where have my messages come from? Who's instilled those messages in me? And are those messages to my benefit or not, or are they to my detriment? And if they're to my detriment, how can I lessen them and how can I move towards the more beneficial ones? And it's thinking about that in terms of yourselves. So where do your messages to yourself originate from? And how do you continue with that in terms of managing that so that it is, like I said, to support you rather than hinder you in the things that you're expected to do? A person's meta-emotion philosophy will influence how they react and respond in terms of emotions in others. And I'll explain that a little bit more here in terms of emotions that influence how we react and respond to emotion of others will differ between individuals. So my reaction can be very different to Holly's reaction, and we could be experiencing the exact same thing. So we're going to show you something a little bit later that will demonstrate that. By reflecting on the feeling, naming it, and then responding to what others need in the moment, the impact of our unconscious meta-emotion, we can help think about what, if we reflect on what's happening for us and we're naming it and we're responding to it in that moment and thinking about that, we can think about then how we are with others and how we are displaying our emotion towards others and how we are feeling. If we know how we're feeling about ourselves, we will be able to share then and think and make space for how we feel about others. So I think the key message from all of this is notice your feelings, notice the feelings that you have and how in those moments those feelings are being managed. And where do those feelings come from? So again, this is the way that I was saying to you, we're going to describe to you in terms of how we experience others' feelings. So I want you to think about background music for a minute, and I'm going to share with you that's the visual. We're going to keep that in mind, and then I'm going to share this with you with that meta-emotional philosophy. Oh, for some reason, the sound on this isn't working for some reason. Might be in a minute, so if you just give it 1 second. Oh,
I think that one linked, Maryam, so you might have to just share your screen for that one. Sorry to
okay. So I'll just stop sharing for a minute. I'm just going to see if I can do what's needed with that. Carry that recording on for the purposes of the presentation. So yes, so be mindful of your background music, be mindful of how different situations evoke that for you. Okay, and I really want to think with you in terms of your well-being. This was something that people said within the chat earlier. There are things here that will be really useful for you to take in terms of we have them as steps, but really it's thinking about how you apply them for you to yourself, for yourself. So thinking about opportunities within your context, so within your lives, where is it that you're able to connect? Where is it you're able to be active? Where is it that you're able to keep learning, keep that curiosity? Where is it that you have the opportunity to give? So it's that sense of giving, it's that sense of sharing. And are you able to take notice, that step away? So it's thinking for yourselves, the 5 steps to well-being. These are 5 steps that are very much advocated in terms of what's useful and helpful for us in taking care of ourselves. So we want to help you think for us to think with you in terms of what you already do. So how do you already connect? For example, there we've got some lists, seeing your friends once a week. That's something that for us, that was important. At the moment, that'll look different because of the distances, etc. But we do more of that now than before. How can I do more of it? My next steps. So that's the connecting part. So the 5 steps, the connecting. So it's being together, keep learning. How do we keep thinking so that we're developing those processes in terms of our own learning? And how could I do more of that? What are my next steps? Thinking about being active. What am I already doing? What could I do more of? And what do I need to do in terms of the next steps for that? And then forgiving, so it's thinking about how can I do that's not something that's going to make me feel like I'm doing more of the same, but something that I get joy out of. So really, when we're thinking about giving, it's about the connecting to that feeling of joy and positive emotion. So what's going to instill that? So how am I going to do more of that? So it's not taking from me, it's putting in for me. So it's thinking about it in that sense and taking notice. What can I do with regards to looking around me, what's happening? So I'm so focused and busy, but how can I step away from that? So what Holly and I were really keen for you to do is to do this for yourselves. So we really want for you to have the time, for a little bit of time, I'm just looking at the time, just to have a think about this. So we're going to put you into breakout rooms. So we're going to have about, I'd say, about around sort of 7 or 8 minutes, thinking about your well-being plan. So it's thinking with this, we're going to give you this in terms of your handouts at the end as well. So you will get this in your pack. But what we really want you to do is think in the breakout rooms, your own well-being plan, and how are you going to share those ideas together? So thinking about your well-being plan, how are you going to connect, how are you going to keep learning, how are you going to keep being active, how are you going to give more, how are you going to give more, but that's going to bring you joy rather than take from you, and how are you going to take notice. So I'm going to do that now in terms of a breakout room. So we've got 9 people in total, and I would like for us to, keeps flashing on and off, so I'll just stop sharing for a minute so I can do that. Sign automatically. We'll do 3 breakout rooms, and I'll call you back in about 6 minutes if that's okay, and we'll remind you of those 5 things if you forgot. We'll make an announcement in the breakout rooms. See you in a little while. Okay, great, people are coming back. Okay. Oh, good. So we are coming back now, hopefully, and just seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're all back.
Great. Okay. So hopefully you had the chance for some thinking and some planning together there. Oh, I don't know what I'm. Can you see my screen again?
Yeah, that's
okay. So really good discussions, really important for us to think about very much about how we do this for ourselves, and that plan will be shared with you so that you can continue to do that. And we hope that you do that. Really important. So I'm just going to let you take over, Holly, for the next bit. We've only got a few minutes, but I'm sure we'll get through it.
That's fine, no worries. So yeah, it was just if anyone thought of any barriers that they might come across when implementing the plan. If anyone wants to drop any thoughts around that in the chat, any stumbling blocks that might be there. Oh. Just give it a couple of minutes.
Just in terms of some of the things that we were saying in our group, the stumbling blocks were, it is sometimes not putting as much emphasis on what's needed for ourselves. So it's being conscious. So I think it was that sense of we have to do this consciously and make time for it consciously, because we can quite easily not give it the importance that's needed.
Yeah, and I think that's just as well from Paul as well, saying it has been time as well. So it's just making sure that we try where we can to make sure that it is a priority, I guess, so that we can support each other, knowing that when we look after our own well-being, we can support others through that too. So yeah, I think if we go on to the next one now, yeah. So it's just to think around as well in terms of our support networks too. So it's not just for us to take on in terms of as to cope and as to manage. We have a wide range of support networks around us, so it's important that you recognise those support networks and who can support you. So within your inner circle, it might be your family, your friends, and then outside of that, you might be looking at your colleagues and those around you as well. And then further than that, we might be looking at the community as well. So it's just emphasising the importance for you to recognise who sits in that circle, and how can you make the most out of those relationships and connections you have within those inner layers too. These are just lastly just some questions to consider and thinking around. Maybe this might be useful for other staff members to use in terms of your school and thinking around that, so you get to know actually what works for your other staff members, so you can support each other and just recognize that a bit. So what I am like when I'm struggling with my well-being, so how might you feel, how might you be around that situation, what I do at work to keep myself as well as possible. And you might notice some key themes between your staff, that actually there's some staff that do similar things to other people, so you can put a real focus on this in terms of your practice too. Ways that can support me to maintain my well-being, feeling manageable. If I'm getting overwhelmed at work, signs that other team members might notice include. So again, it's important to be aware of, actually I can tell my colleagues struggling a bit, and they might need a bit of support around this. So it's just being aware of certain things that you can put in place to notice that. If my team, if my team member notices that I'm struggling, these are some of the things that they can do to support me. So again, we don't often have these conversations as to what is helpful, what would help me in this situation. So again, it's just opening that conversation, that platform to have these conversations around what would be helpful. And just lastly, what would I like my colleagues to avoid saying or doing if I'm struggling? Sometimes people have the best intentions, but sometimes the words that come across aren't what you want to hear. So it's just being aware of the language that we're using, but being aware of what suits that individual too. So yeah, just a bit of guidance around that as well. And then just lastly, just some signposts to support as well. Very important. Again, we need to be seeking the support and normalising this, that actually, if we are struggling, there's places out there that can help us and people that do care to listen to what we have to say. So these are some guidance in terms of, we've got Young Minds, Samaritan's Mind, Winston's Wish, that often focus on bereavement and helping children and young people to grieve. The Mental Health Foundation, and again there's a nice visual here that has all the key contacts on there so that it's easily accessible as well. So yeah, that's there. And just to summarise and to finish off quickly, so this is a nice little visual in terms of thinking around tokens that you can take away with you from this session and going forward as well. So just if you could quickly put in the chat, what tokens or token would you take away with you from this session today?
And before we all go, it's just to say thank you so much as well. I'm taking the token of gratitude. I feel so grateful that I've got the opportunity working for a service in LA that provides such amazing opportunities for us to talk to staff like yourself. To have you here and think with us has been brilliant, so thank you.
And I think on the back of that, I'll just probably take the token of forgiveness, because I think sometimes we feel guilty for taking time to support our well-being, but actually forgiving ourselves is important. So yeah, I'm going to take that with me. And then we've got some others coming through. So belief, a breath, connection, a break. Yeah. I hope you get to implement them.
And again, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. These handouts will be given to you so you can have a look at them in detail. So you'll get the PowerPoint, you will get a a blank template of your self-care plan. Really hope you do use it. Please use it. You're important. We need you. You need to fill your cup in any way that you can, in any shape that you can. So on that note, we'll let you go, and thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.